guys for joining us. Today, I have the pleasure of having my good friend Jeremy here, who has been having some interesting experiences related to a few sleep paralysis entities. Correct, my man?
Yeah, man. I've been having sleep paralysis off and on throughout my life since I was a little kid. I would say probably about fifth grade is whenever they first started to like occur in my life. Kind of made me like believe in ghosts for a really
Holy
long
shit.
time. Um, Essentially, whenever you have sleep paralysis, when you're falling asleep or when you're waking up, your body can essentially get locked up like it's going into REM sleep, where your muscles no longer move, or you don't have control of them anyway. But it starts to trigger the actual dream cycle in your visual perception. So you can get hallucinations and all kinds of like vivid experiences that aren't actually happening, as if you were dreaming but unable to move.
Holy shit. And how old are you now, Jeremy?
Like I said, I started to experience them whenever I was in like fifth grade. So I'd say like I was like 11 years old, 11,
But how
12.
old are you now?
Oh, currently 30 years old.
Okay, so you've been having this for damn near 2 decades now.
hmm Yeah, I probably have an episode or two once a year or every year or so.
Interesting,
They
interesting.
usually come across in high stress situations or falling asleep in like an unfamiliar place.
Really?
hmm
Okay. And I mean, I've heard it be described in a lot of different ways by a lot of different people. I mean, would you be able to kind of walk me through not just the physical sensation, but just kind of the mindset that you're putting through?
Well, usually you are like I said, I'm trying to fall asleep, right? Anytime it's ever happened to me, I've been in bed and I've like, or on a couch or something like that, and I've actually been, trying to either fall asleep or drifting off. Maybe I was just laying there watching a TV show and I was passing out or something like that. But the typical sensation is that you almost feel like you snapped awake. Um, and following that, you like try to get a sense of your bearings, and sometimes it does feel like you are actually moving, but then you all of a sudden have a realization that you didn't do anything. Whatever action you were trying to perform didn't happen, right? And it's almost like a bit of a lag time, right? So take my last episode for instance. I had passed out on the couch, and I remember feeling like I woke up, and I remember specifically whenever I was laying on the couch, I had a blanket on me, right? Just relaxed and watching TV. And I felt like the blanket was no longer on me for some reason. So I was trying to reach down and pull what I thought was a blanket at my feet up on top of me, right? And then I realized that that action didn't happen. Okay. And then you start to realize that you can't move, something's wrong, right? And that's whenever hallucinations can start to like really like come into the scene. And for me, I've always had a very similar hallucination of seeing like a silhouetted figure in the room, that you usually doesn't move at all. It's just like a stationary, taller than average humanoid silhouette, and it's usually pretty fear-inducing for me. Whenever I perceive it in the room around me, I remember last time just trying to, for some reason, reach back for that blanket and like cover myself up like that was going to protect me from some kind of invader or something that my brain was perceiving was in the room. Um, but it eventually, after like a minute or two of like this feeling of me trying to reach down and cower from this figure, you almost like kind of snap out of it, and your body's in a completely different position than what you were trying to actually perform. You were, yeah, I was just like rolled over on my side asleep, right? So any of the perspective in the room was completely different. Yeah, it's a pretty wild experience, to say the
Oh, I
least.
can imagine. I can imagine. I mean, when this is happening, do these entities kind of feel like they're just kind of leering over you, or are they like physically?
Yes, almost always. I can even go back to whenever I first started perceiving them. I remember the room I was in as a child. I didn't have a door on my closet, right?
Right.
I remember it being just off of my peripheral from my head to the left, I could look and see the closet, right? And when it would happen when I was a kid, I used to believe that the house I was living in was haunted because I would see this figure standing in the closet,
Hmm.
right? So as a as a fifth grader or whatever, I was thinking that, oh shit, I'm perceiving ghosts, like there's ghosts in this house. Um, that wasn't the case at all. Like it took me years to finally like discern what was happening to me, or like learn about sleep paralysis, and that I was actually like hallucinating or kind of having a waking dream, as it were.
Right, but I mean, you're kind of saying as a kid you were noticing these figures in your closet. I mean, this was like
Mhm.
even out of the sleep paralysis experience, just like
No, no, no.
okay,
This was me coming to realize later on in my life that that's what I was experiencing as a kid.
gotcha, gotcha,
Is
gotcha.
I was experiencing the paralysis. I believe in supernatural entities per se. Like I don't think that one soul comes back vengefully and tries to haunt people or anything like that. I believe that energy has to go somewhere, right? You die, the energy is going to go somewhere, right? Now, is it possible that maybe you like your memory or your energy leaves like an imprint somewhere? I could see that being like almost like a pre-recorded um, message, right? I could see that being a
Gotcha.
possibility, but I don't believe that there's malicious ghosts out there like haunting people and attacking them or anything like that. I don't think that this figure I'm seeing during my sleep paralysis is some kind of ghost that's following, because it's always the same for me anyway. It's always a
Really?
very large, looming, silhouetted humanoid figure, somewhere around like 7 to 8 feet tall. Almost Slender Man like, but not slender, if that makes sense. Just very dark
Thicker.
silhouetted. Yeah, very much like just a large looming shadow. It's almost amorphous. Even it's kind of hard to tell that it's humanoid. Sometimes it kind of like will shift a little bit in the hallucination, but never like coming towards me. I've never had it like walk up to me or anything like that, or like reach a hand or anything like that. It's always just like a looming shadowy figure. I think my brain is just trying to uh, maybe cope with whatever's happening. I always had kind of like night terrors and stuff like that when like throughout my life. So maybe it's just like the dream that I was naturally going to go into, or a nightmare I was
Right.
naturally going to have, almost being like a waking sensation.
Hmm.
So
You know, and I mean, it sounds like you've obviously done quite a bit of research in people that have sleep paralysis. You seem very informed about your condition. I
mhm.
mean, I'm not all too knowledgeable. I mean, is there a common denominator in people that go through this, or pretty
Normally,
random?
narcoleptics
Okay,
all have it almost every time that they are slipping into sleep or coming out of it.
really?
Um, Sleep apnea can be a trigger as well. If you
Okay,
have sleep apnea, that is also a trigger. And then, like I said, sometimes it just happens for people with high stress or falling asleep in different places, which is usually my trigger.
gotcha, gotcha. And when you're having these experiences, I mean, it's obviously not fucking pleasant. I mean, there's no way it can
No,
be.
no,
Um,
it's very fear inducing. I've never had a sleep paralysis experience where I wasn't terrified.
okay,
Like coming out of it,
right.
yeah.
And I guess that's kind of my question. I mean, these blobby figures, whether, I mean, it kind of sounds like you're a bit skeptic about them being, an entity or not.
Hmm.
Whether they are or they're not, I mean, do they just carry a vibe of terror, a vibe of like, I mean, I guess what I'd always wanted to understand is, does it almost feel like a psychic attack? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I know you're familiar with D&D and stuff, like,
Yeah, yeah.
would it be sort of
Um,
like a mind flay sort of thing, or something like that?
I don't know if it's necessarily. I feel like the fear is already there, and it's just like amplified. Like whenever you're having the experience, not being able to move is such a terrifying thing. When you
Right,
think you're trying to move, um, that it's just like amplified with the idea that you can't move, and there's something that is destroying your safety or your
right, of
internal security in your brain, like that you're could be taken advantage of in this moment. I think that
course.
that's like the really fear-inducing thing. And yeah, I don't think that I'm being psychically attacked by this figure. It's definitely amplified, like when you do notice it.
Right.
But I feel like the fear first sets in whenever you realize that whatever you're trying to do isn't happening.
I see. I see. So, I mean, at least what I'm gathering here, I mean, you've kind of seem like you understand it's a condition, and the
Hmm.
entity is really just a representation of. I mean, your mind representing the condition. I mean,
Yeah.
are you pretty convinced that's as far as it goes? I mean, it's just a quirk of your mind.
Well, it's from what I've read about this condition happening to other people, the hallucinations vary widely on what
Right.
people experience whenever they are hallucinating. Um, Outside of my initial actions, the only thing that I would say is consistent is the looming figure. But I've tried to do all kinds of other stuff whenever I've like noticed the paralysis or am actually going into the hallucination, like trying to crawl out of bed or trying to stand up, thinking I'm changing a channel, all kinds of different things. And then, you realize that you can't move. And I feel like
Right.
that's like the significant fear trigger right there. It's what I'm telling my body to do isn't doing it. So something's wrong. Like you immediately think something's wrong here. I don't think I've ever been in the scenario where I'm realizing something's wrong and been like, this is just sleep paralysis. I don't
Right.
think it's you're that cognizant enough to realize that it's just something that's happening and whatever, move on. Like not like tripping or something like that, where you can possibly like be like, all right, well, this is going to end. Whatever. It's you have this innate fear in your body that something's wrong and you don't have any way out of it, right?
Right. So it's not like when you're. I mean, have you ever had an instance of lucid dreaming? Um, I mean, it
I
kind of
I,
sounds
I
like
think
that.
I've had experience in my dreams where I feel like I've had control, but I
Right.
don't know if I necessarily did. You
So I mean,
know?
it kind of sounds like it's the same headspace, except you really don't have control. I mean, that's where the
Hmm.
terrifying part comes in.
Yeah, and it feels really close to reality. Like sometimes you're in a dream, and I guess that's the lucid is like being like, oh, I'm in a dream. Um, but sometimes you know that this circumstances would never happen. I feel like while you're dreaming, whenever you're having the paralysis, it's incomprehensible. You
Right.
don't know that you're in sleep paralysis. You don't know that you're dreaming. It feels so real.
Hmm. Right. So it doesn't feel like hallucination. I mean, that's
And
really
yeah, you don't feel like you're hallucinating when it's happening, but understanding that you are kind of like helps, I guess. I'm not sure.
no. I get you, man. I get you. I mean, it's really like I mean, kind of like the comparison that you made a second earlier about tripping. I mean, it's you
Mhm.
can be tripping and not realize you're tripping, but when you do, things kind of change. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
seems
exactly.
like it's a similar situation where you wake up and you just got no fucking idea what's going on.
Hmm.
But you said you've been having it for so many years that I mean, you must be somewhat familiar with the headspace.
Like I said, it's really just it's hard to notice for me anyway anything outside of like that inescapable fear like when it's happening. And normally realistically it only happens over the course like a minute or two
Right, right,
when
right.
it's happening, but it can feel a lot longer than that, you know um like similar to like a DMT sensation, like where you feel like hours have gone by in minutes, right?
Right, right,
It can be similar to like that. It can feel like the terror is just lasting forever.
right. So that being said, I mean, it does feel a bit like a bit of a psychedelic experience in a sense. I mean, I'm not, you know,
Hmm.
saying that you would compare it to like a full blown ego death situation where you're seeking for that
Hmm.
because you gotta be like actively seeking that, um, but in a way, it does draw a lot of comparisons in my mind from what you're describing. Like,
I've never had a paralysis experience end without me like almost shooting up out of it. Like that's
Really?
you struggle so long against your body that when you do finally are able to wake up, that you almost like shoot up instinctually. It usually follows like a little bit of an adrenaline rush or something like a maybe if you woke up out of a nightmare or something like that
Of
before and you've
course.
been like sweating and maybe a little heart palpitating. Like it's almost always like that whenever you're coming out.
Gotcha, gotcha. I mean, it sounds like it would be kicking that
Mhm.
fight or flight instinct right away.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I never, I mean, I could say I've had things that I would say resemble it, but it's just never been a returning thing. I mean, I'm sure once
Hmm.
or twice I've had the night terror thing, but I can't ever recall a situation in which there was someone in my room or a thing in my room. I mean, that
Yeah.
takes it to such a different degree, man. Such a
Hmm.
different degree. So, I mean, what are you doing now to avoid it at all, or is it something you just like don't care about when it comes, and you just deal with it?
It's probably more along the latter that when it happens, you just kind of gotta ride it out and move on. Like I said, I have a couple experiences, almost every year, um, and it's usually like I said, different space of falling asleep or high stress will possibly induce it. Um, but yeah, you just kind of grapple with the situation. It sucks, and then you move on. Like if anything, I feel more sorry for people with narcolepsy because they experience it way more frequently than anybody else in the world does. And
Yes.
that like their situations have got to be terrifying.
Right. So it's understood then that people that with narcolepsy, whenever they go into into the state of passing out, because narcolepsy essentially is someone that just goes to sleep randomly, correct?
Yeah, they're able to fall into REM sleep like almost instantaneously. And when it happens, sometimes they're still awake. So hence the paralysis. It's their body just like, all right, well, we're going to sleep now. And they're like, no.
Huh.
Like it's almost like having acute narcolepsy without actually having narcolepsy. Because I've never
Right.
had a situation where I've just like fallen over into paralysis, doing something.
Right.
It's
Right.
always been whenever I'm comfortable, actually actively probably trying to go to sleep.
No, of
That's happened for
course.
me.
But I could say that being terrified. I mean, I know a couple people with sleep apnea, and
Hmm.
it got so bad for one of them to the point where he was driving and he was passing out. So I mean, I could just imagine just falling into that feeling just at random times would be extremely sketchy, man. Extremely sketchy.
Yeah,
Uh,
I used to work with a girl in one of my past jobs who was narcoleptic, and it was very much much more treatable than it used to be nowadays. Even so,
right.
like really really heavy cases, you can be medicated and maintain like a normal like lifestyle for the most part. But it was very much that when she wasn't at work or at school, she was asleep.
Gotcha. So I'm assuming they give him some sort of upper to keep him going through the
Yeah.
day or something.
That's exactly what she was taking. They essentially gave them uppers.
Well, it's a good thing that we can deal with these things, but
Hmm.
yeah, I guess we just hard to tell. I mean, it's not too hard. I mean, there's plenty of studies showing that sleep is so essential, but I do wonder with these people that have these sleeping issues if they're not just kind of falling in and out of these states where they're, I mean, essentially hallucinating, right? I mean, that's kind of what's
Yeah,
going on. They're in just such a different
you are
place,
you're having a active hallucination about the place you are currently in.
right?
Like it doesn't take you away to a different place like a dream would. Right, you're going to have if
Hmm.
it happened in your room right there and you fell asleep into
Yeah,
paralysis, it would be a hallucination of you in your room currently.
right. It's almost kind of like doing a little split in the timeline, but kind of staying here. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's not like a full blown trip where you're kind of flying through the inner verse, looking at the sacred geometry and shit. So you're still
Yeah,
here. I mean, it's like a alternative moment in the same moment. That's
exactly.
insane.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I gotta ask, man. I mean, you've been having these your whole life. Would you say
Mhm.
you are a bit more susceptible or just a bit more receptive, I guess, of these sort of paranormal or just metaphysical weirdness of the world? I mean, is there anything else that you've noticed, or are you pretty much, not
Mm,
not seeing stuff? This is it.
I've had forced hallucinations through psychedelic use, and I've had these sleep paralysis hallucinations, and I gotta say that um, one that's forced through drugs can almost feel like good or spiritual in a way, whereas the hallucinations through the sleep paralysis is going to be nothing but terror. Um, so I wouldn't say that I feel like there's another metaphysical entity in the area, but I will say that I feel like maybe the taking drugs is potentially opening some kind of I would say like nexus for thought that helps bring these into being, at least around you,
Right, right.
right?
No, definitely, definitely. And I mean, the sleep paralysis experiences have never come into play while you're under the influence of a catalyst.
No, no, I've never uh, gone from like tripping into a sleep paralysis
Right,
hallucination.
right. Totally different vibes, totally different things.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm, hmm. It's very interesting, man. It's very interesting.
And it's almost exclusively like the sleep paralysis hallucinations. They don't really mess with the world around you. It doesn't look like things are shifting. Colors aren't moving. Like a lot of the time, whenever I'm you're on like a low dose of LSD or something like that, a lot of the time things like shift and move in your optic vision. None of that is happening. Everything is very stationary the way you left it. It's like I said, that's why it feels so real, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I've never had a trip where I wasn't like, oh, I'm not tripping, or I've anytime I've had a trip, I've been like, oh, well, yes, this is the drugs doing this, and this is, what it is, right?
Right.
But the sleep paralysis hallucinations just feel so terrifyingly real. um,
Hmm.
the world around you just it doesn't distort in ways that you think it
Right. That's the spooky part. I mean, you're seeing an
would.
alternate version, but no, I feel you. No, when you're under the influence of something, I mean, it's clear what's going on. You kind of chose to do that, but
Mm-hmm.
just seeing a darker version of what is there, yeah, that's as spooky as it gets, man. That's putting on the spooky glasses and looking around. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, man. Well, I'm happy to hear that it sounds like it's just an every now and then thing. It doesn't seem to torment you or affect your day to day life, does it?
No, no, not at all. And normally, like I said, the episodes are typically really actually short, even though they can feel long. So you get that sense of time back almost immediately. Like, oh, well, that was only a couple minutes, and then you can either roll back over and go to sleep or what. Now, I have had situations where I've had sleep paralysis and then like tried to roll over and felt myself like going back into that mode and had to like get up and do something. Like I
Hmm.
could feel like my body was going to start locking up again, so I just like slapped myself a little bit and got up and walked around for a while before I like decided to lay back down. Maybe smoked. Sometimes that can help.
Right, right.
Put you back to sleep or whatever. But yeah, just a wild shit, man.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you. Like, if you have any tips and tricks for people that are going through stuff like this, but it sounds like
Man, there's nothing really you can do. You just got to write it.
write it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Your brain printed the ticket for you.
yeah, man, it sounds like one way or the other, it's making your mental fortitude grow. So, you know, prepared for whatever may come. And that's a
Yeah,
good way to
when
stand.
when Cthulhu comes, I'll be able to hang on to my sanity a little longer than
You'll be all
everybody
right.
else.
You'll be one of the last ones to make a stand.
Mhm.
Um, about that, when do you think Cthulhu's coming?
Uh, um, I don't know, man. Like, I would like to believe that there are definitely like extra dimensions and creatures beyond like human comprehension, stuff that could make people go insane just from being able to glimpse it. That's pretty cool. I like the idea that people who do write about that stuff have some kind of like maybe tie or their dream ties into another world that they're being able to see. You know, because
Right.
Lovecraft, a lot of his creature designs, he said he dreamt them up, right? Or he shopped them with other horror writers of the time. But if it would be crazy if this man had like during his dreams was connecting to another dimension almost and like seeing the
Right.
the beings there. I like the idea of like almost astral projection. You know,
Right.
your soul or your metaphysical mind traveling beyond what is real,
Of course.
or at least what our brains perceive as real.
Of course. I mean, do you know the reasoning behind so much like cuttlefish and tentacle, artistry in the Lovecraftian designs? I mean, is there a reason for that?
It's specifically to do with the deep, man.
Uh,
At the time, horrors in the ocean were still pretty prevalent. You know, you're talking back in the 1800s, ship
of
fare, that kind of stuff.
course.
Anytime people would see, you know, squid, octopus, it was so alien and otherworldly compared to any other like
Uh,
creatures on land or normal other fish. So the idea of the darkness of the waters and these tentacled like beings being able to restrain you, it almost peaks that level of horror, right?
no, of course,
In
of
your
course.
brain.
I find it so interesting that they're always connected to just the going insane factor. You know, the seeing so much that you seem simply lose your mind and can't come back from it.
Hmm.
I mean, they're so psychedelic in nature. You know, it's like the heroic dose you don't come back from. Really, you know,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they
for
take a
real.
hold of you, like you see too much, and that's it, bro. Like you're fried. You're fucked. I
Hmm.
mean,
The idea behind like the Cthulhu cultists is that they would, upon releasing this dark god, they would be able to gain knowledge that no other mortal would be able to obtain, right? And somehow that would transform their being into something greater.
interesting.
Normally in the books they would just go crazy and end up dead or something like that. But the idea of like ascending, or at least in like D&D you see people like become like mind flayers or some kind of morphosis and becoming a higher being, a more psychic being, right?
Right, but in those accounts, they end up usually having some sort of physical issue, right? I mean, it always ends in like your head exploding or like
Mm, I
becoming
don't know.
tentacle.
Not necessarily like your head popping. At least Lovecraftian, more like just dribbling,
Right,
drooling,
right,
like no thought process, vegetable brain
right.
kind of
Just your
thing.
mind being blown to the point of no return.
Yeah, complete vegetation.
Hmm. And it makes me wonder. I mean, the writers of the time. I guess it was just a time of wonder where not much was known, but a lot of these
Hmm.
concepts, man, they really are so occult in nature, you know, and so trippy in nature, really. I mean, these ideas, you got to wonder, and especially with the what you just brought up, with these things coming to him in dreams, it really makes you think, you know, all of this lore is, you know, just in his head, is it coming from somewhere else? But it's just such wild concepts,
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I would very much like to not believe that my sleep paralysis is connecting to some metaphysical being that is just, following me around, because that is a horrifying concept to think about.
I think
Um,
it's even scary to think that there's like this big entity that visits all of you people that have it. You know, it's just like, I don't know, just it's just like in control of this network of sleep paralysis phenomena.
yeah,
Um,
maybe we're actually getting a glimpse of the deity that rules over dreams.
right? Yeah. No,
Hmm.
that could very, yeah, dude, Mr. Sandman or whatever.
Right.
That could be him.
That's another terrifying thing to think about.
Well, I mean, I've heard some people make the connection before, just because it's related to sleep. But
Mhm.
anyway, um, no, no, it's interesting. Any other occult, uh, uh, cults other than the Cthulhu followers that you would nominate for coming in 2020? Um,
Hmm.
who else would you
I
say
mean,
would
I
fix our
would
world?
like to I would like to see another like maybe Lovecraftian deity or something like the Shoggoth or something like that.
Who's Shaka?
Yeah, the Shoggoth is just it's like think like elephant legs, but a giant like black body, just consisting of eyes and tentacles and mouths.
Oh shit! So he's kind of like the classical representation of angels, just like fuckery.
Just black amorphous. It's all black, like I say elephant legs just because it's huge and it typically walks around on like four stout appendages. But yeah, it's just all like black amorphous body, tentacles, eyes, and mouths everywhere. The mouths are typically, uttering phrases that are too horrific for humans to comprehend. It shatters people's egos just being near it or being able to hear it, that kind of stuff.
Damn, dude. Does he have a bunch of followers trying to bring him into this world too?
Um, I mean, if this was along the same Lovecraftian mythos,
Right,
yeah, there's
right.
probably people, yeah. Or
Oh
maybe we'll
man.
get some like at the Mountains of Madness stuff where they finally, the caps melt and the
Huh.
ice caps melt and two giant, Lovecraftian style monsters come out, the old gods, and tear the world asunder.
Of course, man. I know so little about the old gods and all that stuff, but it would be quite important, I feel, to kind of just understand that side of the occult. So much
Hmm.
knowledge there as well, and you know so much
Cosmic
about it.
horror is a fun pipeline, man.
The what I'm sorry?
I said cosmic horror is a pretty fun pipeline to delve into.
Oh, of course. And,
My first D&D campaign I ran was all cosmic horror based.
and
The
when you say
people
cosmic
that were
horror, we're
playing,
talking like planets that are entities and shit, right? That are like,
yeah, that's something too. Specifically, the deity that I was going off of was another Lovecraftian deity. The name is eluding me at the moment. I'll have to get back to you on it. But it is the deity that actually existed in the darkness of the void before like almost anything else, right? And its
uh,
its idea is that essentially light, planets, other things started popping up in its domain, and that it didn't like that. So its ultimate goal is to return everything back to the darkness, right?
oh, okay, okay, huh? Fuck, dude. I read and I guess have read in the past a lot of just what you would consider normal manuscripts of the world, and I
Mhm.
guess I'm not the most knowledgeable in D&D, but from what I'm hearing from you, man, like all this stuff could be the lore for a religion. It could fully be the. I mean, is most of the D&D manuscripts and stuff written out like as deep as some religious text?
Um, Normally you just get a profile, like in the books or anything. Whenever you're purchasing a book, you get like a profile of a god, what it represents, and then it's kind of left up to the dungeon master to decide how he
Oh,
wants to play that deity. Right? You have like a
gotcha,
profile to follow, and they do a good job of keeping gods in like alignment. So like your lawful evil, your lawful
gotcha,
good,
gotcha.
neutral, that kind of stuff. And with that knowledge, you can ascertain how to play that specific deity.
Right.
Um, the cosmic horror ones are fun to play just because to try to understand its goal is to lose yourself in the process.
Right. And I'm sorry,
So
cosmic horror, is that just refer to just horrors that are out in the
that's the
space?
idea of old gods. Yes,
Okay.
cosmic horror is the idea of old gods like Cthulhu, things that
Gotcha.
existed before prime deities. Like in our world, the Greek gods would be prime
Right,
deities,
right.
right? Or the Aztec pantheon would be considered prime deities, right? But the old gods would have been like, we were here first.
Hmm, hmm.
And if they can get their hands on them, typically they devour prime deities. old gods are typically far more powerful because they existed before creation.
Gotcha, gotcha. Basically, these guys are like before the elements were elements. I mean, yeah,
Hmm.
these are the thoughts that were turned into reality, pretty much.
Yeah, for essentially, yes, beings that either existed before existence or willed themselves into existence before the birth of matter. You know,
That's
they
wild, man.
typically don't have like a domain, like they don't rule over a specific thing. They have one kind of incomprehensible desire, right? And like I said, to as a party in like a D&D game, to try to understand what that god is doing is to potentially go mad yourself.
Of course, of
Hmm.
course.
So anytime you have like a religious text, it's normally like babbling, scrawling. It doesn't make much sense,
Huh.
you know.
No, of course, of course. That's wild. And I mean, some of these authors are doing this stuff because I mean, I'm obviously familiar with video games, stuff from Blizzard. Those guys, like,
Hmm.
they'll write out lore, they'll write out everything. It sounds like with this, it's
Hmm.
more just like guidelines. So then
Yeah,
it's up to you as the dungeon master to then come up with this stuff. So I mean, the role of a dungeon master is like a on the fly fiction writer, right? I mean,
yeah, for the most part, you do, and depending on the person, you can do quite a bit of prep work. Normally, like whenever I'm going to lay out a villain, I put motives, I start to create key characters and figure out how they can fit into the campaign as it goes, because you want to have some kind of like sliding scale of difficulty, right? So as
right,
you dig deeper into the mystery, you find more horrible things along the way to conquer.
of course,
Um, but you can, to a certain extent, kind of guide your players. But at the end of the day, when you're playing D&D, it's what the players want to do that dictates what I have to then follow through with, right?
right,
So if they completely miss all the hooks for a villain that I create and then go on and do something else, then I got to figure out either how to bring that villain back in somehow or make a new one, right?
right, right, man, and that's the fun of it. I mean, that's
Hmm.
really, I mean, compared to just some game that you play with your friends on a computer.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, because I've never actually played a campaign or anything. I mean, Adam, a friend of ours, I mean, he's always been trying to get me to give it a
Hmm.
shot, but I just never had the time. And I mean, these things, from my understanding, can last months, if not years, right? I mean,
It
can
really
become pretty
depends.
epic.
It does. It really just depends on what kind of game everybody wants to play. I played campaigns that lasted, like a year or two. I played games that only lasted, couple weeks. It really just depends upon what everybody decides that they want to play. I like the idea of continuing to come back to a character and building a narrative with them, but at a certain point, I feel like every story needs to end. So I'm not in favor of like some people are like, I've been playing the same character for 10 years. I'm like, that's way too long, man. You know,
Huh.
most campaigns you hit the level cap in a long campaign in a year, right?
Right,
Especially if you're playing like every week. Like once if you play like once a week throughout a year, then you should be done with the campaign in a year if you're playing a
right.
long one. But I don't want to play a character for years and years and years and years. That just that I lose interest in that, and that's probably why I play the DM more than anything. I like to play a whole bunch of different characters. I like to play a king or a horrible snarling beast. That's that's
Right.
what's that's what's that's what's a lot of fun for me anyway.
Yeah, dude, you get so much liberty. I mean, huh. And I've been playing video games my whole life, but this is really like the ultimate game, I guess, in a sense.
It's
It's
all theater. It's all theater of mind, and that's what's the best part about it is descriptors only get you so far. You get really descriptive, and then the player's imagination takes it away, and it becomes almost like you're reading a book,
of
right? Or
course,
listening to an audiobook anyway.
right, like almost like playing a visual novel or something in the sense that you're
Hmm.
just making choices, rolling
Yeah.
dice, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Actions have consequences. A lot of the times, um, in my games, especially, I'll have things that are going to set to happen, and if the party finds them, they find them. If they interact with them, they interact with them. But that shit's going to happen no matter what, right?
Right, right.
Like a war breaking out, if that's a part of the campaign between cities or empires or something like that, or a dark god rising, or a demigod being released from its shackles beneath the sea, or whatever,
Right.
right? You play with those storylines, and if your party can figure out how to stop that, that's cool. You always reward your players for figuring it out. You don't just try to shit on people
Of
because
course.
you want to be secretive, or sometimes your players just figure shit out, and they knock that shit down before you can do it, and that's part of the fun. I've played a game where I really desperately wanted to have a lich be the main villain, and my players pretty much just dominated him before he could be born, so it
Hmm.
didn't happen.
And liches are like skeletal, uh, just powerful entities, right? I mean, what makes a
Yeah,
lich a lich?
a lich is essentially a powerful mage who has made a deal to become immortal, and they take their souls and they put it inside what's called the phylactery, which is like a device of some kind that holds their soul. And while their soul is in there, it can't be whisked away to the afterlife.
Uh,
And from the phylactery, they retain control of their body,
Holy shit! So,
even as it becomes a corpse over time.
uh,
They still
so
maintain
they're like
control of it.
VR, like logging into like a VR headset into their body from this little nexus of souls, pretty much.
Yeah, as just a little bottle most of the time.
What the fuck? So
Hmm.
that's why they're always depicted as decrepit and like. But
Hmm.
what they eventually, oh, so that's why they eventually become bones, and they're just like
Yeah,
bone in
their
their lip.
body will eventually like break down for the most part, but most liches gain a certain level of necromantic power that whenever they need to, they can restore their body. In fact, most liches, if you don't destroy their phylactery and you destroy their body, it'll reform after a certain number of days, and still all shitty and bony and raggedy, but
Right.
it's not like they're dead. To kill a lich, you have to destroy its phylactery.
Fucking shit. Yeah, and I mean that raises brings right to my next question, I guess. I mean, the stuff that you're explaining to me, I mean, is just as cool and just as interesting as something I would read out of the Bhagavad Gita or out of whatever holy book of ancient times. I mean, would you say a lot of people that are involved in D&D and that are pretty into the occult side of things? I mean, not
I
saying
think
all
I,
psychedelics,
I
but just being into the yeah, the
I think if you're a fan of fantasy, if you're a fan of books, if you really love D&D, I feel like you've got to dip into a little bit of all of that stuff to really get like full enjoyment out of it. I've been in plenty of games where I've sat down and been like, oh, I don't know what we're fighting. This is so cool. And after the fact, gone and like looked up the folklore. Almost all like D&D monsters are based in some kind of folklore, a lot
oh,
of it being Slavic. You'd be surprised at how
really?
many crazy monsters the like northeastern European people created, like Polish and stuff like that are still used in all kinds of stories today, like the idea of the witch or the
Right.
hag.
The Baba,
That's
what's she called?
the Baba Yaga. The Baba
Baba
Yaga.
Yaga. She's in Smite.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, very spooky.
very notable Slavic, like horrible figure where like witches came from. Like vampires are like Eastern European, werewolves are like Northern European creatures. The idea of like the ogre is much more Asian based, but like all of these awesome creatures, or even trolls. Trolls are like from Norway and stuff like that. They
Right.
all based in
Yeah.
folklore, and they transfer easily over to any kind
Right.
of fantasy format.
And is the ogre is that like a giant troll or something? I mean, what makes an ogre an ogre? I'm just curious. You got like ogres in pop culture like Shrek and shit, but
Hmm.
like
I wouldn't ogre. Shrek is a very unique ogre. in my opinion. A lot of times, especially in like the Japanese mythos or something like that, the ogre is seen as like almost a bodyguard type of gods, right?
Uh,
And they're usually tall, massively tall, like 2 stories tall, rippling muscles, heavily armored. A lot of them wear glaives. They usually have like giant tusks protruding from their bottom lip in some fashion, and
holy fuck.
like horrible visages, huge eyebrows, giant eyes, snarling noses that can breathe fire, that kind of stuff. But they're
Yeah.
very much seen as like when your soul is going to be judged in the afterlife, they're like flanking, making
Whoa.
sure that you're going where you're supposed to go. Like I'm sure you remember Dragon Ball Z, right?
Of course.
So anytime Goku died or whatever and he went and saw King Yama, there'd be dudes walking around. A lot of the time they looked really lame. They'd be wearing like shirts and they'd have glasses with little like horns on their head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Those
yeah,
those
yeah,
are like
yeah.
the equivalent of what ogres are in their
Gotcha.
world, but they're actually in mythos like giant hulking warriors,
Yeah, see, ogres are a lot cooler when you look at them that way, because I think in a lot of, especially modern Western RPGs, like even in a game as big as Dota, one of the biggest
Hmm.
characters, Ogre Magi, he's a fucking dope.
Hmm.
They're a lot of times described as just like dummies, but they're not. they're
No, no,
learning quite a bit.
real ogres are highly intelligent, at least in like mythos where they're from anyway. Um, there's just so many fantastic creatures, like I said, that lead back to real lore that you can look up and read books on that people wrote about. Like even fey creatures. The Feywild is like a really big part of D&D, thinking about like sprites, pixies,
Hmm.
unicorns, dryad, satyrs, those kind of
A whole
creatures. They all have. Mhm.
druidic kind of theme, I guess, right?
Yeah, Celtic stuff, but the Fae have actual texts. Like you can go look up books that came out, in the 1500s, 1400s that have descriptions of Fae creatures that you can find and where you can find them and stuff like that. And believe these people believing that they were real entities in their world, right? You don't have to go back that many hundreds of years to find people believing in unicorns really running around in the woods.
This is true. And you're saying the face stuff was going on in 1400s?
Yeah.
So we're
Hmm.
talking 700 years ago, people were writing nonfiction textbooks
Hmm.
describing the anatomy of fairies and shit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
yeah.
not that long ago, man. That's like,
No.
yeah, like 5, 6 generations ago.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome, man.
Yeah, to think about what was going on there, to just even ponder if maybe they were actually around, right? Or it's just so much to think. Um,
Yeah, I do like to subscribe to the idea that maybe these beings really did exist at one point in time and they
right.
just went back to their own worlds, you know. Maybe there are demons, man, but they do just exist in another dimension, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, most definitely. And why they come here from time to time, I guess, is just something we gotta slowly figure out.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're right. Like bringing up the whole idea about fairies and all that. I mean, they're so prominent in culture. Like even in Mexican culture,
Hmm.
not that long ago, 100, 200 years ago, people were still writing about gnomes and fairies in the Ciudad de Mexico, in the main city of Mexico. So I mean, this was what's considered a metropolitan area,
Hmm.
modern even for its time, and people were still convinced that there was gnomes in their front yard. So I mean, yeah, who knows, right? But
Hmm.
I find it very fucking fascinating.
Oh, yeah, I love the idea of like gnomes and red caps, from like Fey lore. Gnomes being like just more like annoying critters in your yard, whereas like a red cap would actually be like a horrible creature to find that would most likely kill you and your whole family.
But a red cap is a variation of a gnome, or
Yeah, yeah, they look like gnomes, except they have a red hat, right? And they usually have an axe in most depictions and really thick, giant iron boots. Is
oh
another
my god,
descriptor, is they always have giant iron boots on. And in lore, the only way they can exist and the way they feed is by killing something and soaking their hat in whatever they kill's blood,
oh
and then they put it
shit,
back on their head, and that's the way that they sustain themselves, is by filling their hat with blood.
whoa, dude, they're just little bloodlusty bastards.
Yeah, they would act like garden gnomes until they, would smile and reveal that their teeth were all actual pointed, sharp, giant fangs, and then they, come at you with an axe and then kick you in the head with their boots.
Shit, bro. I mean, is the lore that these guys are like a band of gnomes that was like, "Fuck you, we're gonna take advantage," or are these just like creatures that guys?
They're fake creatures that would poof into existence in the Feywild whenever acts of murder or malicious murder would happen. So if you were in the Fey world and you murdered something, like let's say you murdered a unicorn, you would probably birth a red cap.
Oh, okay, cause and effect. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just one of those things. How they
Hmm.
explained it. Dude, you know so much about, I guess, just ancient mythology in general. Is
I
most of
love the
this,
stuff.
yeah, but is most of this from D&D, or is this just stuff that you're interested in?
A lot of it started with the D&D, and then it went further. I needed to know more. I needed more context to how to fit these into a narrative and build a good story around them, right?
Of
So
course.
I go find all kinds of informational like videos on like YouTube or on like Googling documents and stuff like that, and
Uh,
just reading about it. There are some really good sources about this kind of stuff on YouTube. There's one guy I listen to. His name's AJ Pickett. He puts out lore videos, and not only does he go into like a creature's lore within the D&D universe, but he'll also talk about where it came from in relation to um, real history. Where
Gotcha.
notably it came from.
Holy shit. Okay, that's amazing. Um, I had no idea we were going to be getting into these topics, and I feel like I could talk to you about this stuff forever. I don't want to take up all day though. I've already taken up about an hour of time, but
Hey,
maybe
yeah, no
soon.
problem, man.
I'm sorry.
I said, yeah, no problem, man.
I said
This is a
maybe
good combo.
maybe soon if you get a chance, we could do something where we just talk about like I don't know a few interesting entities in the lore or whatever. Man, I would love to learn more, and I think a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of people that listen to us or that are interested in all the cool stuff we're interested in would love to learn a bit more because I mean, a lot of us read some ancient texts and stuff, but all of these creatures, I mean, they are based off of that. And
Hmm.
um, to be honest, I think they take it a step further. It's quite fun and interesting.
Yeah, dude, I'm about it. I'll come back anytime. Anytime you want to talk about something.
Awesome, bro. Awesome. All right, man. Well, I won't take up any much more of your time. I know this was something that you kind of had to move some time around for me, and I really do appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
But I mean, anything else you'd like to share with us? Any last little tip or anything for those suffering from the sleep paralysis? Any words of encouragement?
Uh, just ride it out, man. It only lasts so long.
Yeah, ain't that the truth, man? The truth about most things. Well, all right, Jeremy. Pleasure talking to you, brother. Thank you so much again, and I really hope we can catch up soon and talk a lot more about these beings because I feel like we could talk for an hour or two just about these interesting creatures.
Yeah, definitely, man. You guys have a good one.
All right, brother. Love you, man. Take it easy.
Peace.